Dr. Daniel Kraft, who is probably in here somewhere. Is he in here? There he is. Against the wall there. Dr. Kraft has been on the stage of vMed before. He never disappoints. Strap yourself in, put on your seatbelts, because you're going to be in for a ride, as always, whenever Dr. Kraft is on the stage talking. Today, he's going to give a talk about what's next in the Medi-verse, which I mentioned this morning is a term that I really think he coined. That's the first time I heard. He's very good at coining catch terms. Medi-verse, I'm going to give him credit for. He is many things. He's a futurist. He's a doctor. He is a former, he's actually a current pilot and a former, was it Air Force or, I don't know, big jets, maybe. I'm always getting things wrong up here. He was a finalist for the NASA astronaut program. I'm pretty sure that's correct, right? Yeah, got that one right. He also runs, he's the chair of medicine and singularity, and runs a number of conferences, most recently the Next Med conference, which just occurred a few weeks ago. And so we have, if we can bring up a slide, I'm going to read his title because it's, I forget exactly, it's a lot of N's. It's what's next, and what's now, what's next. And there it is. Okay, it's coming up. In the Medi-verse and in digital health broadly. There it is. What's now, near, and next. So thank you, Daniel, for being with us today. Really appreciate it. Here's your clicker.
Thanks, Brennan. All right, thanks, Brennan. It's great to be back. I think I was here for the very first vMed in 2018. It's amazing to see the sort of progress that's occurred since then. And yeah, I'm going to try and talk a bit about the metaverse and what's now, near, next, and about how health and medicine is more broadly changing to be a bit more digital, hopefully better, more intelligent, more super connected, data-driven, more democratized and accessible, and yes, metaverse enabled. Though my focus won't be extensively on VR, AR, and XR. And I got up this morning a little inspired to do some art, so of course I did some art about the future of the metaverse and XR, and of course I'm a terrible artist. I had a little help from a version of DALL-E on my mobile phone, making those seconds in seconds. And of course we've all been experimenting with now ChatGPT-4, and I guess that's supposed to be the G word for today. But it's been pretty, and I didn't really cheat and have it write my talk, but I could have. But it's incredible how this is the quickest, the fastest applied or accelerated technology that's on the planet's history. So fasten your seatbelts because we're still in the early days. All sorts of interesting applications are being built. And again, it's the first inning. And I think it's a bit of a phase shift, almost like the Gutenberg Bible, or when many of us remember when the internet first came online, and I think we need to not underestimate its potential. This is an interesting chart from Pat Scannell. Like technology is accelerating exponentially, but our ability to cognify it and then societal and business and policy and ethics sometimes is lagging, and that's what we heard yesterday with the folks looking to slow it down a little bit. And this paper is just out today from my friend Peter Lee at Microsoft Research, which is worth reading, just out in the New England Journal today, with some great examples and limitations, whether it's chat bots or note-taking or curbside consults or passing the board exam. So an interesting time, of course, that layers on top of what's possible in the metaverse. And I think if you think about where this all comes together, generative AI, I think we'll end up in generative health. So imagine it's almost possible today that you can kind of create any virtual reality, extended reality environment around you almost on demand and describe that. So if I said I want a pink elephant on the moon, my little phone-based app just built this for me a couple hours ago, and I want to have folks doing psychotherapy on the couch on the moon with a pink elephant, and we'll do that as well. So imagine this new world where you can sort of build anything in the metaverse almost instantly that matches the individual, their age, their culture, their policy, their politics. So interesting times for all this sort of to converge. So back to the big picture, of course, health is wealth, and I've been sort of an accidental futurist, or more a bit of a nowist. I gave a TED Talk now, 12 years ago, about the future of medicine. There's an app for that when the first apps were coming online. And the theme was not about apps per se, but how things were getting faster, cheaper, smaller, more accessible. And when you mash them up at their convergence or their confluence, that's where the opportunity to do things completely differently. And I think the AR, VR world and metaverse world is a good example of that super confluence, going kind of from the universe, small bits of data that's not often very unified, for this now sort of integrated Medi or meta-verse of health and biomedicine. And we need to appreciate the pace of change. 20 years ago, what fit on a desktop now fits on our smartphone, now fits on our FDA-cleared medical watch. And of course, that exponential change has been going across the VR, XR, AR world as well. And the potential for these new convergences and confluences are to create entire new fields, from extended and mixed reality and beyond, that didn't exist certainly when I was a Stanford medical student 20-something years ago. And that gives us this new opportunity to be reimagining healthcare across the continuum. What's possible today and what's going to happen in the next decade, I think, will make the last 10 years look slow. And I think we need to have a bit of that 10-year vision if we're going to go to kind of from now to next. Because we're still in this era of intermittent episodic sick care, and we have the potential to really enter this new world of true health, self, and often virtualized care, which we'll talk about. And not to just focus on the disease side of the equation, but even the idea of precision, not just longevity, but health span and wellness. Not to live forever or to be 120 and feel 120, to make 100 the new 60. And there's a whole bunch of effort and thought going into that realm. This is my wife's grandmother, my grandmother-in-law. She's 104, holding the hand of my 8-year-old. 98 years of difference, 6-year-old. And she lives in a pretty amazing community in Jerusalem. You want to think about not just the social determinants of health, but the social determinants of aging and health span. And I think the next decade we'll see a lot of interesting work starting to be able to really understand the roots of aging, maybe even as a disease, and the early stages of being able to reverse it. So just watch that space, stay healthy as we reach that possibility. But where are we today? We're still going in the wrong direction in terms of lifespan and health span, at least in the United States. We're still in an era where if I go back and visit Mass General where I trained, you'll still find fax machines, paper forms. My last cardiac study done at Stanford came to me on a CD-ROM, and I don't even own a CD-ROM player anymore. So we still have challenges with our old sort of infrastructure, HIPAA based on pre-digital age, restricting our ability to do certain things. We're back to waiting rooms. We had our telemedicine blip during the pandemic, and we're still pretty much siloing how we organize our health systems, our pharma companies, our medical departments, when in reality we need to be sort of better connecting the dots into the more integrated, continuous form of biomedical knowledge that's not siloed by specialty or disease or by anatomy. And so as we enter this new age, we need to appreciate the art of disruption, right? Many fields have entered the fourth industrial age, how we get our digital banking, our digital entertainment. They've been disrupted. Entire big companies have gone bust. You don't have Kodak or Blockbuster or Ring anymore. And we've seen a lot of course, terrible disruption over the last 3+ years from the pandemic. And the pandemic has sort of opened many of our eyes that, many fields have reached that fourth industrial age. Health and biomedicine is still stuck in the third or maybe even the second. And COVID has been a bit of a catalyst, right, to sort of take what used to take 10 years or 10 months and make it sometimes happen in 10 weeks. And we just need to take some of that energy forward as we go into this new age. So I'm an optimist. I love this quote from my friend Regina Dugan, who used to run DARPA, that just like Sputnik set off the space age, COVID has sparked a bit of a new health age. We need to kind of keep that momentum and that acceleration going to reach its potential. So I've been sort of an interesting, trained in med, peds, hematology, oncology, bone marrow transplantation, at this convergence of thinking about this future for a while. I've, as Brennan mentioned, shared medicine for Singularity University. I've run a program since 2011 called Exponential Medicine, which we just relaunched as Next Med Health. And the idea about a program like that is to get people out of their silos and come together and cross-fertilize. The VR, AR, XR people meeting video gamers and CRISPR people and drone builders. We had an amazing conference 2 weeks ago. Brendan was one of our key faculty. We also had Raphael Grossman there and a bunch of other folks. And I would argue in whatever you're doing, just make sure you're reaching out and cross-connecting with different fields going forward, because that's where the magic happens. It also comes from changing perspectives. We had back Tony Young, the head of NHS Innovation, who shared this old quote, that the difficulty lies not in the new ideas, but in escaping from the old ones. So a lot of us have new ideas, but it's often our colleagues or our health systems are stuck in the old mindsets. So just about a year or two ago, I gave another TED Talk, 10 years after that other one, about how COVID had transformed the future of medicine. And it was 10 years after that 2011 one. So it kind of gave me a framework to think about where were we a decade ago, where are we now, and what's coming next across health and medicine. And I was reminded of this quote from Bill Gates that most people tend to overestimate what they can do in a year and underestimate what can be in a decade. So we come back from vMed23, 2033, what might be the art of the possible? So I want to kind of stimulate some of that thinking. Because it's not just about framing the future and about technologies. I wrote the opening article for Nat Geo, had an episode about that. But again, how you cross-connect them and think about where they're going to be in the next 2, 5, 10, or 20 years. So where were we, let's say, 10 years ago with the genome? You could go to 23andMe and get your SNPs done and meet relatives like I did. I met my relative. We share a common haplotype. Of course, in the last decade, the price of sequencing has dropped at twice the rate of Moore's Law, so roughly $100, $200. I think in the next decade, it'll be down to $10 or less. But we're not even utilizing the basic genetics we have right now in workflow, like pharmacogenetics, for example, or understanding that almost every common disease can be subsetted into understanding like type 2 diabetes based on at least 3 or more distinct genetic subtypes if we were to sequence every individual. 10 years from now, we'll be at less than a $10 genome. We'll be able to get a genome maybe instantly on your mobile device. We'll start to be able to really connect the dots like Genomics England is starting to do with millions of patients' data, not just sequencing, but applying that into the clinic and learning and moving back and forth across this sort of integrated infinity loop. So connecting the dots between data, insights, and actionable information. And of course, it's not just the genome that's getting accessible and exponentially cheaper. There's the proteome, these exposome, the sociome, the metabolome, the microbiome, the bugs on our skin and our gut, which play such a huge role in health and disease. And now we're just at this beginning stage of mashing up all that information, often kind of summarized with the idea of the digital twin, being able to kind of put that into an engine and almost like a flight simulator predict what might happen with prevention, diagnostics, and therapy and apply that to a very individual patient or to a community or to a population. So that's going to start opening up next across health and medicine and be truly actionable. So to appreciate all this, you need to, of course, remember the role of exponential technologies. Moore's law, and Moore just died last week, the idea that the technology or computation gets twice as fast and half the price every 12 to 48 months is continuing, right? An example, I visited my friend 10 years ago at the VR lab at Stanford, and that was the state-of-the-art technology, millions of dollars. Of course, that now all fits in an Oculus headset for a couple $100. What might be possible in the next decade? And of course, quantum computing, even if Moore's law puts out, will be available soon for everything from understanding digital biomarkers to AI and drug discovery. So on this exponential, of course, our phones are our perfect exponential. These are more, my iPhone 2, which I still have and works, has more power than a Cray supercomputer had in the 90s. And of course, rumored to come out soon in the next month or two is the Apple virtual augmented reality glasses. Those might also soon dissolve into our contact lenses and give us AR, VR, XR, and all sorts of new applications. And so we need to think about, even they start out a bit kludgy, where they might be again on this exponential age. How AR, VR, XR is going to extend into our virtual avatars, and we're sort of passing the uncanny valley. And of course, in the next year or so, we might not be able to tell at all what's real or what's not real. And we respond to these engines, as we've heard, and avatars as if they're real individuals. And of course, the theme of this amazing gathering, augmented, virtual, extended, mixed reality, has all sorts of applications to make massive big data actionable and useful at the point of care, whether it's the operating room, to guide a surgeon through a procedure, for example, to start making things more efficient and less expensive, all the way to sort of upskilling a surgeon, a clinician, a community health worker, a pharmacist, to kind of integrate and do what only a super specialist might have been able to do in the past. So from driver assist to clinician assist. And of course, even can be assisting you with your yoga moves. And of course, VR is fun to put grandma on a roller coaster. That's sometimes our first experiences. It's a little cruel, and it's been amazing to see this community build so many applications, from physical therapy to mental health applications. My own story is early in the pandemic when the gyms were closed, I did 100 days straight in Supernatural. Some of you have probably tried that. And my resting heart rate, as you can see on the right, went down by like 10 points. So it was a good example of VR for exercise. And of course, all the applications many of you have been building for medical education, from Justin and Oso VR to the folks I just saw outside the door, not reading a VR headset, but visualizing complex anatomy for the clinician or the patient. So lots of kudos to this community for what you've been building. Let's say on the diagnostic front, a lot of things are changing as well, right? 10 years ago, we had the very first version of a diagnostic on a smartphone, the IBG Star, to do blood sugar. Now we're ending this era of the phenome, being able to collect all sorts of different labs and digital biomarkers and other markers that, when we connect the dots on them, can really lead to precision wellness and better early diagnostics and therapy. So I think we're entering this age of systems medicine, sort of the field started by Leroy Hood, who keynoted NextMed Health, P4 medicine, precise, personalized, proactive, and participatory, started to make sense of all these massive amounts of data. And a decade ago, we had the very first examples of diagnostics, again on the smartphone with the prototype of the EKG from Dave Albert and AliveCore. Now these technologies you can buy on Amazon, or you see ads from CNN, you can get a credit card version of an AI-powered EKG. Just a taste of what's happened in the last decade. And what's going to be coming next is the ability to have this almost without thinking, right? Blood pressure, for example, is shrinking on our watches or patches. Several versions have just been FDA cleared. I'm actually wearing a watch, not FDA cleared yet, but does blood pressure and blood sugar. It seems to be pretty close to when I measure it optimally. So that will be integrated into our Apple Watches and patches and otherables pretty soon. What are we going to do with continuous information in that regard? Or not needing to wear anything. The idea of invisibles, the fact that your camera can pick up vital signs today. Platforms like Bina.ai can again seamlessly pick up vitals and maybe even blood lab values as well. And so all of this is, again, increasingly mobile. The smartphone is medicalized. We're not even using all its applications. Some startups have been using the microphone and speaker to look in your kid's ear and diagnose otitis media and tell whether it's viral or bacterial. The camera can be used in augmented virtual reality sense to understand wounds and track them. Or the camera from a company called Healthy.io I'm on the board of can now replace the urinary, the urinalysis. Instead of tracking a UTI or preeclampsia or screening for early kidney disease, you can just do it at home, press a button. This is now just FDA cleared and is really effective at doing a virtual urinalysis and makes it easy for everybody and particularly easy to pick up early kidney disease in folks at risk. And then another invisible is voice as a biomarker, right? The sound of your voice, cougholytics or acoustic epidemiology. Is that cough, croup, COVID, or TB? The sound of their voice can tell. So bottom line, these new sorts of wearables and otherables and technologies can start to give us a bit of a nudge. We can understand our risky behaviors and hopefully head them off, because that's what causes most of our disease. And of course, we're only 12 or 13 years into this sort of wearable and quantified self world. The Fitbit only launched in 2009. Now we have wearables and otherables for most every component, can start to measure almost every component of physiology and even laboratory elements. Just a few fun examples. Of course, there's now patchables that can be powered by body movement. Some are now, wearable ultrasounds that can look at cardiac activity. Sockables to track the health of a diabetic foot. Underwearables, you get a pack of 10 of these, Internet of Medical Things, and they track you as long as you're wearing your underwear. Ringables, I'm sure many of you have an Oura ring. I've got 2 different versions of rings on right now that, of course, are really good at tracking sleep or can predict pregnancy 5 days before a home pregnancy test. But they're also potentially useful for public health measures. They can actually predict your titer from a COVID booster. So consumer devices can be used in many medicalized ways. Or patches like BioIntelliSense can essentially be a $1 a day patch that can stream an intensive care unit level of data. Lots of new data streaming off our bodies. The challenge is, who owns that? Well, what do we do with that? Breath is another example of a quantified measure for picking up early signs of cancer or metabolic disease. And sometimes it can be simple, small data. Send a patient home after a total hip replacement. Are they walking more, as you might predict, or walking less? And if they're walking less, not doing so great, you intervene early. It doesn't need to be fancy technology to make this useful today. So a decade from now, I think all of us will have our digitome, our digital exhaust collected continuously, whether we want to or not. The trick is, again, how do we use that in smart, proactive ways? And it's going to blend with other data, right? There's now the ability to do kind of Theranos for real, little remote microsampling. This is work out of the Stanford Healthcare Innovation Lab. They just published it a couple months ago. Multiomics, single drops of blood with multiomics. This is from Mike Snyder's group. Now, a drop every single hour with wearable data can give tremendous insights into health and disease. Not that you're going to do a drop of blood every hour, but we might be able to get really robust baselines for each of us and each of our patients going forward. And of course, this relates to sometimes our most important drugs, like food, right? We can use AI, machine learning, augmented reality to understand our inputs, quantify whether it has peanut allergies or gluten. So we can measure inputs, and of course, we can measure outputs now with our new sensored toilets. Poopables and others are coming. I know many startups in the space. Get your ins and outs for the GI folks here. And you can all do your continuous glucose monitoring whether you're diabetic or not. And we connect the dots between your microbiome, your genome, your metabolome. We can really truly move to, I think, precision nutrition, which has a huge role, I think, in health and disease. Another thing that's moving pretty quickly is diagnostics. Here comes my brain color-coded. I had my whole body MRI'd for about $2,000 from Prenuvo. And these are still expensive and not inaccessible and certainly not a great public health measure. But, applying AI machine learning is going to give us new ways to avoid incidentalomas. And I think in the next decade, we'll be able to go to a CVS or Minute Clinic and get your full body scanned in under 10 minutes with AI radiology to give you a cancer screening, combined with something like GRAIL blood-based scanning. And these MRI machines are getting more portable. This came out a year or so ago. It's a portable MRI machine, 20 times less expensive, mobile. In fact, I had my own brain MRI'd on a boat going down the river, Hudson River on a boat, plugged into wall power in 5 minutes. Proves I have a brain. But that was, interesting experience. And these might get abrogated by wearable devices like Mary Lee Jepsen's Open Water, a wearable device that can pick up strokes, masses, and maybe even provide therapeutics into the brain. So watch that diagnostic, theranostic space. It's getting super interesting. And the opportunity for us, for those who are clinicians or even are not clinicians, is to bring these diagnostics anywhere. Here's my sort of digital doctor's bag. Some of it's in my pocket, some of it's at home. Whether it's a smart stethoscope that can do an EKG as well and tell me what that heart murmur was. Or soon we're going to throw away our stethoscopes because we now have AI-powered consumer ultrasound devices that will actually be in the hands of consumers and can democratize diagnostics anywhere on the planet, from rural California to rural Rwanda. And I think, big picture, this is another example of an ultrasound device for screening kids, which is AI empowered. You don't need a clinician at all to screen for cardiac disease in a newborn anywhere in the world. So lots of innovation at this convergence point. So of course, a lot of this new data needs to be made sense of through AI, or I like to call it IA, intelligence augmentation. And of course, we had a lot of hype 10 years ago. IBM Watson was going to be the doctor in your pocket. And of course, it took another decade to get to where now we have hundreds of AI-powered, FDA-cleared applications. So you don't want to forget Amar's law. We tend to, again, overestimate what might happen in the short term and underestimate what might happen in the long term. So think in the XR, VR, AR world, what might be possible in the next decade. And AR, of course, AI is, of course, playing a role in radiology, pathology, even gastroenterology, Brennan's field, so it might pick up a lesion that someone might have missed. It's being applied in all sorts of settings. Again, I think can really improve access and health equity. The challenge is, how do we integrate what the human can do and the robot or the ChatGPT? And that you've heard that famous line that AI is not going to replace your doctor, nurse, pharmacist, but the doctor, nurse, pharmacist using AI replace those who don't. So we're going to see this sort of hopefully cobot where collaboration is what is necessary. And increasingly the robots themselves, today they can be, you can be an avatar and be inside the robot and start to give remote care, but increasingly with maybe AGI, we'll have these autonomous bots be giving care, become virtual pharmacists, and be part of our unmet need in the workforce going forward. So watch that space as well. And of course, a lot of this comes together in the field of what's often called digital health. And I think about digital health as the ability now to take all these new forms of data and apply them in a smart way, whether it's an app or VR solution that really matches the individual or the clinical need or the community. And of course, there's a whole bunch of work going in this field to show that it works in many cases or it doesn't in others. We're now at the age of FDA-cleared digital therapeutics or digiceuticals. So instead of prescribing a pamphlet to someone, they can give them an app for smoking cessation or for mental health, or prescribe them a VR headset or a video game for treating ADHD. The challenge is no one wants an app, a device that's separate for all these different devices. I think the next few years is going to see a lot of convergence and consolidation, kind of the one ring to rule them all, the one app or platform, sort of omni-channel is going to become a lot more integrated into our care pathways. So a big shift that's starting to hit is now this realm of taking all these other wearables and other information and moving from quantified self, where we own the information ourselves and have it on our smartphone, to shift from quantified self to quantified health, where this data is going to be useful for proactive optimizing health and health span, to diagnose diseases at stage 0, not stage 3, and then therapy can be much more data-driven and feedback loop enabled. And of course, now we can start to connect the dots on our mobile devices, and platforms like Verily's Project Baseline or the NIH's All of Us trial, enabling millions of Americans to share not just their digital data, but their omics, their medical records, so we can use that information in smart, predictive ways and not just have one-size-fits-all studies based on an average population. Imagine when every patient has their own personalized FICO score for their health, for example, or we understand when their check engine light for the body goes on early, and we can intervene proactively. And some good examples of that, again, from Mike Snyder, is the ability to use your wearable to predict who has COVID sometimes 2 or 3 days before symptoms or the COVID positive test would go positive. So lots of opportunity to kind of move to this minority report world where you're going to be informed that you might have a disease before you're symptomatic at all. Now the challenge with a lot of these new solutions, even a lot of the amazing ones out there in the hall, I hadn't seen half of them, is how to make sense of them, how to integrate them into the workflow and get them utilized. So that's a pain point, and I've been trying to track all this for a while and thought I needed to build something to help address that challenge. So launched a platform called digital.health. You can't forget the domain name, so go to digital.health. And the core feature is a bit of a digital health formulary with over 2,000 digital health solutions. For example, you're looking at diagnostics, and you might look up the AliveCore device and understand what it does and its evidence base, and put that in your digital health formulary and prescribe that to a patient. Maybe that might even be covered by insurance, for example. Or looking at virtual reality, a whole bunch of VR-related solutions on there. This is just a quick screen grab from earlier today. You can look at things that are related to wellness or diagnostics or therapeutic and sort them and save them. We just built an aisle specifically for vMed, so you can go to virtual reality solutions. It's a bit of a curated list. It's not all of them, for example, but you can look at evidence bases. Again, save those, share them, and hopefully increase their utility going forward. Make your own digital prescription pad. So I'd ask for all of you is add your solutions to digital.health. It's super easy. My co-founder, Parisa Vitanko, is a pharmacist, and now the CEO is here, and we've got a section over there. So check it out, and again, please add your solutions to digital.health so we can up-level them and provide them to all. Now, All these digital and otherable solutions, again, create massive amounts of data, and it's overwhelming today to the clinician. This is a cartoon from NextMed Health. What is it, doc? Just as I thought, you're generating too much data. No one wants more data. What we really want is actionable information. And to close the loop between information and data coming from a wearable, otherable app, et cetera, into the workflow so it's useful and not overwhelming. And of course, to design these technologies so they don't add to our burnout and beyond going forward, that sort of famous quadruple aim, improving clinician experience. And as we saw just last week with ChatGPT, it might even start to be writing our notes for us, which would be great. Who needs epic fail? So lots of opportunity, again, into the workflow component. And what I'm most excited about, though, is the ability now in this new Medi-verse is to sort of crowdsource our healthcare information. Just like this is a map of Rome being built by Waze drivers, imagine we could build a Google Maps or Waze for healthcare, where everybody had the opportunity to donate their data and glean insights that are beneficial for the driver who's right behind you, for example. So we can think of ourselves not just as organ donors or as blood donors, but as data donors. And there's some great examples of these sorts of platforms that both empower patients to donate their data and see and help others, but also to be engaged in their care or to join a virtual clinical trial. And COVID was certainly an accelerant to virtualize clinical trials. There's several platforms you can all join now, like Quantified Citizen, to do studies on microdosing of psychedelics, or really powerful platforms like StuffThatWorks.health, where with any condition, you can say what's working or not working from you and learn from others with your condition, and eventually that will show up in the workflow of a clinician to see what's going to be working for a patient like mine. So this sort of Medi-verse crowdsourced model going forward. And finally, all of this is going to shift, again, how we practice care. Obviously, we've seen this shift from intermittent episodic data, usually only collected in the four walls of the clinic, that leads to our reactive sick care mindset, waiting for the heart attack, the stroke, a late-stage cancer, in my world of oncology, to this sort of emerging field of continuous data that can be much more personalized, much more proactive, start to enable care anywhere, anytime, with much more health equity and hopefully better outcomes at lower costs. And this is from Leroy Hood, this whole idea now that we're going to start to be able to understand diseases and pick them up early, those small perturbations from health to disease, find those problems in that transition, at the transition point, not the disease point, and intervene for true data-driven wellness and prevention. I think that's hopefully where we can shift going from sick care to health care going forward. So in closing, again, this shifts where care happens, from the hospital to home, to our phone, to our VR headset, from hospital to hospital, and of course the incentives and the payment models are moving in that direction as well. Virtual medicine and telemedicine wasn't new before the pandemic, but it's certainly been accelerated. And now with ChatGPT, et cetera, when you talk to that chatbot, it's going to know your entire medical record, what you did last summer and what your watch said you were doing night before. So these are early platforms, but the next decade will make these really almost magical. And of course, the avatar, who is your clinician and how do they show up, is going to change as we enter this Med or Medi-verse, right? This is an example from, I think, USC, or I just got turned into an avatar in LA a few months ago. We can all be turned into an avatar in a matter of a few seconds and show up potentially in personalized ways and eventually be animated to match the needs of ourselves or our patients. Which begs the question of who gets into medical school or nursing school or pharmacy school, and how do you educate them into this new age, not just to have good bedside manner, but good website or good Medi-verse manner as well. All right, so I'll close with the point that I've already sort of made, that we're now in this age of Internet of Medical Things, creating trillions of points of data. And today it's still often quite siloed and hard to connect the dots between those, between fax machines and EMRs that don't talk to each other. So our challenge, I think, as a community in XR, VR, AR, and beyond is to close that gap from just generating more data to making that actionable information and insights, and then narrowing the gap between how they can be used at the bedside, website, or in the headset. So big opportunities to narrow that gap even further. So we're entering this new health age. It's up to all of us to play a role in that. It's not about any one technology stack. It's, again, thinking exponentially and also thinking convergently, because that's where the magic happens if we're going to reimagine healthcare. You, again, don't want to be stuck in your 2023 mindset, as miraculous as it is, but be like Wayne Gretzky and skate to where the puck is going to be in 2027 and 2033. And so if we have that convergent exponential mindset, we really can move from where we are now, intermittent, episodic, reactive, often physical, one-size-fits-all, mostly sick care, to a future that's much more continuous, proactive, personalized, anytime, anywhere, increasingly virtual and hybrid and personalized, crowdsourced, AI and big data enhanced, and is aligned with incentives and the care that we all deserve around the planet. So with that, let's not take incremental steps, let's take exponential ones. The future is already here. A lot of you are building it, a lot of it's in our pockets or in the hall outside. So our opportunity is not to just imagine that future, but build it collaboratively going forward. So with that, thanks for having me, and let's go build the future.